Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. If you now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Granquist?
Here.
Arns?
Here.
Merrill?
Here.
Weeblehouse?
Here.
Huron?
Here.
Jackson?
Here.
Clausen?
Here.
Hildebrand?
Here.
Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
But then look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Takes us to item number 19 on the council agenda under special presentations. This is a proclamation for June 2021 as PTSD Awareness Month. I will read the proclamation. Whereas June has been declared as PTSD Awareness Month each year around the world, and for centuries we have recognized post-traumatic stress disorder, and PTSD can affect all ages, children through seniors, and treatment for PTSD is available. And it is up to each of us to know that PTSD assessment form is a major tool to seek medical assistance, and PTSD Awareness Month urges all to seek help for those who may have PTSD requiring medical assistance. Now, therefore, I, Josh Money, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim the month of June as PTSD Awareness Month in the City of Norfolk, and encourage citizens to actively learn about the PTSD assessment form written by the Center for PTSD Research as a tool to assist those affected by PTSD to obtain medical assistance. Is there anyone here to receive the proclamation this evening? Appears not. So we will move on to item number 20 under public hearings and related action. So I will open this public hearing to consider an application to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for a community development block grant in the amount of $505,000 to assist in developing a mobile health clinic to serve the residents of Northeast Nebraska to prepare, prevent, and respond to COVID-19. And to kick off this hearing for some background for us, we will hear from Mr. Jeff Christensen of the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District.
Hello, everyone.
Evening.
As the mayor said, I'm Jeff Christensen. I'm a business loan specialist with the development district here in town. Dr. Verbitsky is here with us. He's the gentleman that's applying through the city for this mobile lab. So if you've got any specific things for the mobile lab itself, he's the guy to ask the questions to. But as far as the block grant application, I'm sure the city has gone through many other CDGB applications before. This is slightly different because it's COVID funds that came from the CARES Act funding. Other than that, it's gone through the CDGB process, which involves the process of holding this public hearing. And if it's approved, it goes to the Department of Economic Development for their official approval. And then we get contracts and all the other documents to sign. Other than that, I've already got documents to the clerk for you to sign related to the application process too.
So as you stated, this particular grant application is related to a kind of specialty grant resource that was authorized through the CARES Act. Is that correct?
Correct.
How much money do you know did the state of Nebraska receive?
The total amount I do not know. Okay. This application is $500,000 for the business itself to go towards the purchase of the equipment, which is an RV. It'll be specially equipped, plus other equipment. And then the business owner has his staffing funds that he'll have matching funds. And then there's also $5,000 for administration, for us to do the administration of the grant. So the total is $505,000.
Okay. Any other questions?
Jeff,
Might be
this,
some, oh, go ahead.
Jeff, this is not This is separate CARES Act money than the city of Norfolk would be receiving, is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So is it received by the Nebraska Department of Economic Development?
Right, yep.
What is it labeled that it can be used for as far as the equipment? Does it travel in the area, or does it stay generally for Norfolk?
Northeast Nebraska.
And is the treatment accessible through the mobile unit, particularly in response to public health pandemics, or even more specifically just to COVID-19? Should there
COVID-19, yes.
be a need? Okay.
And the clinic will have all the higher technology aspects to it, telemedicine, distance consultations.
Okay.
Be-
Dr. Verbicki,
be-
I'm sorry, can you state your name and then
Oh, sorry.
sign into a form there in front of you
Keith
just to follow
Verbicki.
process?
But, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So again, the question being, are the services accessible on the mobile unit specifically designed for COVID-19 response? Is that the sole use of this, or what is the?
It's designed for that, as well as the future of any pandemic issues or public health crises that we'll be able to address to our rural areas of northeast Nebraska by going out to them instead of asking them to come to us. We witnessed, as you know, the decrease in the ability of patients and how frightened they were to come to the offices here in Norfolk, and this is a means of reaching out to them for health care.
Okay. Public health pandemic, emergency response, how broadly defined is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, public health response. We're in discussions with the University of Nebraska Medical Center with their next project, and they see value in working with our public health departments here and having this type of resource available to capture and help the rural healthcare in Nebraska. And as far as we know, it's very unique, as far as no other types of service like this are present in the state, and be able to provide this to northeast and central Nebraska we see as a real positive for Norfolk.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Verbicki, what is your timeline, you hope, if
Tomorrow,
everything goes
yeah.
well?
Tomorrow, once we get approval, we've identified the type of vehicle that would be appropriate and the instrumentation that's necessary in order to provide all the services in the mobile clinic that you would basically receive at a physical office within our community.
And you hope to be up and running?
Yeah, typically, it's about a 4 to 6 month type of layout is what I'm told.
All right, thank you.
Would something like this be utilized in like emergency situations, say like when Pilgrim got wiped out by a tornado? Could you go over there and help and
Yes,
be
sir.
on location for the workers even after the fact?
Yes, sir. Yes, yeah. We'll be able to mobilize those type of health services at the point of care. And as you know, medicine is becoming patient-centric. We're going to patients instead of expecting them to come to us.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. Hearing no one else, I will move to close the hearing and advance to item 21. With that, I would look for a motion to consider resolution number 2021-17, approving a grant application to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for a Community Development Block Grant in the amount of $505,000 to assist in developing a mobile health clinic to serve the residents of Northeast Nebraska to prevent and respond to COVID-19, and authorizing the mayor to proceed with the formulation of any and all contracts, documents, or other memoranda between the City of Norfolk and the Nebraska Department of Economic Development so as to effect acceptance of the grant.
I'll offer consideration for resolution 2021-17.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions, council? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, resolution 2021-17 is adopted.
Okay, that moves us to item 22, public hearing to consider amendment City Code to enact Chapter 13, Article 17 of the City Code. And item number 24 is a related public hearing to address same sections of code. So we are going to join those public hearings. Again, the first item 22 to regulate short-term rentals and permits and business regulations, to amend section 27-2 of the code to amend the definition of hotel and add a definition for short-term rentals in the zoning code, and to enact section 27-284 to address short-term rentals in the zoning code. And the public hearing to consider an amendment to the city code to amend the land use matrix in section 27-601 of the code to create a new category of use, which will be conditional with an existing valid residential and conditional use permit, to remove bed and breakfast inns as a conditional use in District BP, and to add short-term rentals to the land use matrix. And to make some sense of that, and to kick off the public hearing, we'll hear from Val Grimes, our city planner. Val.
Thank you. That is a mouthful. We'll start with the easiest one, short-term rentals. Most people look at me like I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. The brand name that we mostly all know is Airbnb. So people renting out a portion of their house as an owner-occupied, or some people will buy a house specifically to rent it out as a short-term rental through items and internet services like that. Since we do not have that in our code currently, that is what is before you tonight, to actually put code in place to allow short-term rentals, which is by definition that's being proposed a residential use, not a commercial use. So it would only be really in residential districts. We're proposing outright permitted in ag through RO districts and C2 districts, which I know is commercial, but we do outright permit multifamily uses on the second floor above retail in C2, which is our downtown area. And then you heard in there too that we put something new in the land use matrix of a permitted if you already have a conditional use permit for a residential use. And that is in districts OD, C1, C2A, because normally you cannot live in those districts outright, but you may with a conditional use permit. We do have C3 and I1 as proposed tonight also. That is something that the Planning Commission recommended, maybe considering removing those two from the short-term rentals, because you can live in those two districts with a conditional use permit. However, it's a watchman permit only, and that means that you get to live there in C3 and I1 if it's given to a business operating out of that building, and the employee or the owner of the business are allowed to live there. So that is why the Planning Commission recommended to you that maybe you would consider removing those two. We do have Chapter 13, which is the permit and licensure chapter of code, so that we are asking for them to be licensed and registered with the city, like we do quite a few other things like food trucks and solicitors and the sexually oriented businesses that just went through here a little while ago. And so we do have an application section of code that we would like to see. One thing is, because we did kind of take this as an example from another city, something that seemed reasonable that they did that we are also proposing is, since these are in residential districts, that during the application phase and to keep it updated, that whoever is the applicant running this has somebody within a 45-minute range, that if something comes up, that a person can be there to answer questions, help police, whatever the issue may be. And so we do have that in there. And then we also have the section 27, which is the zoning code, that outlines the definitions, where we're proposing that they be listed in the zoning districts. I think that's kind of the general gist of it, if you have questions.
Val, on that regional contact provision, if you want to call it that, are we requiring then that point of contact to be established or listed as part of the permitting process?
Yes, that will be part of the application process.
How's that gonna, I mean, if you're looking to do an investment from out of state in Norfolk, and then all this, I mean, how you gonna, are you gonna have to have a property manager you're gonna have to run through, or?
Yeah, you'd have to have someone somewhat local so that they could be there within 45 minutes.
Seems a little much to me on that side of things. I mean, phone calls, you got cell phone, I mean, people can be contacted anytime. What, do you just need somebody to go to shut things? I mean, what's the emergency that's gonna occur that you have to have somebody there right now? I'm just curious.
Well, like I said, we took this from other places, and that seemed reasonable. The other city that we took it from went through quite a few public meetings, town halls, and that seemed to, I think, appease the neighbors a little bit, that there would be somebody there not 2 states over, taking care of and watching over and maintaining this property, I think, to a certain extent.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, but we're not Rapid City, we're not a tourist destination where you've got a lot of these on each block. You might have a handful, and the ones that you do might be closer to some sort of recreation, but it seems a little bit on the extensive side, I guess. I don't know how they, other communities, I'm sure I know some people that have invested in these. They don't live within, they live in this state, and they invest in properties in Florida and Arizona, and I don't know how they have to run it through property managers, in those communities. That's
Is this more set up, though, as just like an emergency contact, so to speak, that should something go wrong, there's somebody on file to say, look, we need you to show up?
I think so. This is exactly what the code says. Contact information for someone who can respond on behalf of the licensee and reach the short-term rental within 45 minutes in case of an emergency or other issue. If said contact changes during this term of the short-term rental license, then the licensee shall notify the city and provide current contact information. So I doubt you'll have to use it very often.
But you have to have somebody on there.
Right.
That's my point, is who are you, like I said, if I'm investing in this community from outside of the state, who am I using?
Well, some of the things I've seen in the area, and I just saw a deal from a lady I know in Lincoln, that she stayed at a place above a restaurant. It's kind of in the same category. It's not a hotel or a motel, but she stayed there on the same premise. So I think in this situation, people downtown, they own the business, so there'd be somebody here.
No, I understand that. I'm talking so just this last weekend, I knew a couple that had a baseball tournament in Lincoln, and some other couples went in on a house, stayed in the house for the weekend, so they could, for the baseball tournament, and then they left. It's exactly kind of what we're talking about here. My point is, if I'm making that investment from another community, well, outside of the 45 minutes, whom do I use to be that contact?
I think something like this would also alleviate a situation like you have with the post office, where you're always looking for somebody to take care of situations and nobody's around to get it done. If you have somebody within 45 minutes that can be there,
That's fine, but who?
it's not,
But
sounds to me as I do. Or the-
that's what I mean, there's no, so now you're probably looking at contacting a property management firm to manage your property. So, I don't know how those work out with management contracts, is involving, most management contracts are year leases, not weekend leases. I think it's a provision that could be tricky.
It is
All
pretty
things.
wide open from what I can see. I mean, it could be your brother, it could be your uncle, it could be,
Well, if they
Property
all live in-
manager,
If they
it
all
could
live in
be-
Arizona with me.
yeah,
You know,
sure, I mean,
who do you, hey, Rob Merrill, he looks like a good guy, I'll call him.
Yeah.
Do you want to manage my property?
sure, yeah.
I don't know, just doesn't.
Yeah,
Well, I think there's somewhat of a distinction between managing it and being willing to be an emergency contact, so to speak, for showing up if something happens. I think that's probably what this was modeled after.
it
I
sounds to
could
me
go
like
either
it would
way.
be.
I don't know
modeled-
that it's necessary. I don't know that it's imprudent either.
It sounds to me like it would be for police or fire or disturbance of some sort. Neighbor has a problem. You need
That's-
you need to get a hold of somebody in a hurry to
That's what I would have
take care
taken
of
it to be.
a situation like that, is that right?
That's what I assumed it was for, yeah.
So if that person, let's use a case where somebody's they're snowbirds in Arizona, and they're renting out their house, short-term lease of their house here in Norfolk, okay? And they have this emergency contact. Is that saying that emergency contact basically cannot leave within 45-minute drive of Norfolk? So that person can't drive to Omaha, Lincoln, Sioux Falls, Sioux City. They have to stick around this town, basically, if that house is being rented out just because they're an emergency contact. I think I'm with Shane, it seems a little too far that if emergency personnel needs to get to your house, you're a phone call away, you're a cell phone away, you're the person leasing it out. I would think you'd have a lot of interest of answering that phone, if it's your property that has an issue.
That's a good point. I mean, if I were to buy a property like that here in the community, then I'd be stuck here. If I were the emergency person,
I'd like to think we as the city are pretty lenient on some things too, that, yes, I'm the emergency contact, I'm in Omaha for a Saturday, but I'm still the contact, I've been contacted, given the okay for whoever to do what needs to be done, and I will be there as soon as possible. I don't know that we're going to say, oh, you weren't here in 45 minutes, we're gonna fine you or anything like
Sure.
that. I mean, we're pretty reasonable people, I think, for the most part.
I would
but
tend to agree.
We try.
So if I'm this owner of this property, I would want the call to come to me, no matter where I'm at, and not my 45-minute away contact person. It just seems to me to look really good on paper, but it doesn't seem to be very practical once you get into the agreement of, as things are going down.
Well, I would feel the same way. If it were my property, I would want somebody to notify me first, and then if I could get a hold of my local person, or if you couldn't get a hold of me, you'd have a local person to try to get a hold of. But I would certainly want to know.
I would think notify both the applicant and the emergency contact, but if the applicant really is in Arizona or Texas or something like that, you probably still want your local emergency contact to come back, see if there's damage, and get things taken care of too, which is probably why you want that local person too, I would think.
I would think as a property owner, that you have those kind of people lined up. Your plumber, your carpenter, your whatever you need. I don't know if you'd put one of those as your emergency contact, but
That's just it, so
I don't know if we,
that's where I'm.
I just don't know if we need the 45-minute time portion. Doesn't hurt to have a contact, but that could be the owner. Just don't know if we need that.
It
minute.
looks like we have a public safety opinion wishing to be issued. So let's bring it forward. Yeah.
We consulted back there, Mayor and Council, Shane Widener. When we go respond to emergencies or non-emergencies, we often get called to those kind of things. We always want to have a contact. We always need to have a contact. I mean, when we're on scene, whether it's a burglary, break-in, broken window, fire, water leak, something of that magnitude where public safety gets called in, it's hard for us to manage if that person is far away. If they have someone 45 minutes or local that we can contact and can respond within a reasonable amount of time, our emergency resources then can be engaged and then disengaged because we have that contact. So from a professional point of view, it's nice to have those kind of contacts in there, have an emergent contact. If you're a property owner, I would imagine you'll want that. If you're in California and you're managing or you own a property in Norfolk, Nebraska, you're gonna wanna have somebody there. The city, public safety, wants somebody relatively close as well, if we can manage to do that. Otherwise, we're sitting there spinning our wheels oftentimes.
Do you think just having a Knox box required for the front door would be about the same? Because then you guys have a key to get in and.
Right. I mean, you can get in. We have Knox box throughout the community,
But I'm
but we
talking
have
maybe
emergency
on the
contacts throughout.
Short-term lease properties, you know, because then you'd have one immediately to get into the property. That'd be mainly the need for contact. By that time, they'd have the owner on the phone.
You know, we contact the owner regular on the phone. It doesn't matter where they're at. I mean, dispatch will look at those numbers. They'll have those direct contacts. We'll make that phone call. The operators on scene will have direct contact with that person, excuse me, no matter where they are. But if they're in California and we're operating in Nebraska and we don't have anyone to finalize or give us resolution on the emergency scene, it causes us some grief as well, because we're sitting there basically holding a property that's had some sort of public safety emergency, and we're engaged with that property, and we want to be relieved of those responsibilities in a relatively good time frame. 2 cents.
Appreciate that input. Thank you, Shane.
I don't disagree with Shane, like, you know, but I think what we're doing is we're forcing people into a contract with a management company for the property when they are already running them through Airbnb's site and stuff like that. So you're at an extra step for these people to do. I mean, maybe that's what, to appease the community, we need to do. I'm just bringing it up that if it's one more step and it's one more, I don't know how. If you don't know, if I'm buy a piece of property in Chicago, you know, and I want to have someplace by Wrigley Field, and I find investment, and I don't know anybody in Chicago, you know, but I'm gonna have to hire a management firm then to be which is an extra cost, an extra fee. So that's where I'm coming from. But if it's more for just, I guess, obviously the public safety side of things and to appease the neighbors, like Val was saying, then maybe you start there, see how it works out. So that's my point. It's going to be an extra step.
So we are still, I think, in public hearing, right? Okay. So this is a public hearing. If anyone else wishes to make comment, they can do so now. Okay. Hearing no one, I will move to the Planning Commission reports. Brianna, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held public hearings on May 18th, 2021 to consider an amendment to the official city code to enact Chapter 13, Article 17 of the official city code to regulate short-term rentals and permits and business regulations, to enact Chapter 27-284, and to amend Sections 27-2 and 27-601 related to short-term rentals. Commissioners recommended approval of the code amendment with the recommendation to remove from the ordinance C3 and C1 districts as a permitted use only if there is a current valid conditional use permit allowing a residential use. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the amendment with an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearings and move to item number 23. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5738, approving an amendment to the City Code to enact Chapter 13, Article 17 of the City Code to regulate short-term rentals and permits and business regulations, to amend Section 27-2 of the Code to amend the definition of hotel and add a definition for short-term rentals in the zoning code, and to enact Section 27-284 to address short-term rentals in the zoning code.
I'll make a motion for consideration of ordinance number 5738 with the amendment as the Planning Commission addressed, and removing C3 and I1 from that.
Motion second. Any discussion, council? Further discussion?
Just one question, Val, you know, unofficially, how many of these have we got probably going on right now in the community?
If I had to take a guess, just looking at websites, 6 to 8 probably.
Not a large amount by any means.
No, but I've gotten quite a few people who have been very interested in this, and if this passes, they want to jump on it if they really is the case, but that's what I've been told.
And were they local people or were they out-of-state investors?
Most of them seemed local people.
All right, thank you.
I
Are we asking these to go through a website such as an Airbnb to do this, or they do this privately as well?
They can do this privately, yes.
The only other comment I had is, I really do like the removing C3 and I1, because that's not a permitted use anyway for that type of thing, so I like that wording in there.
I think we've had the benefit now of having these short-term rentals in the marketplace for some time, being able, as Val said, to look at models in other communities that have gone through the licensure and permitting process establishment, and taking some of the best practices out of that. So I know staff went to a lot of work to put this into place. I know I have been contacted by local people who are interested in doing this. I think you'll probably see more and more interest in years to come in this. So I think it's good to have this policy in place. And there's always, always room to change and adapt and amend should we see necessary. So these are living, breathing documents, and there's room for amendment if need be moving forward. But I would encourage us to go forward on this. And if there is concern enough about the contact provision, I would encourage that to be brought in amendment and not have it potentially weigh down the overall policy, which is, I think, the underlying point to get into place. So, any other discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to enact Chapter 13, Article 17 of the Official City Code to regulate short-term rentals and permits and business regulations, to amend Section 27-2 of the code to amend the definition of hotel and add a definition for short-term rentals in the zoning code, to enact Section 27-284 to address short-term rentals in the zoning code, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5738 as amended carries on first reading.
Make a motion to suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5738 on second and third.
Second?
Motion second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5738 carries on second and third.
Okay, item 25, I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5739, approving an amendment to the city code to amend the land use matrix in section 27-601 of the code to create a new category of use which will be conditional with an existing valid residential conditional use permit, to remove bed and breakfast inns as a conditional use in District BP, and to add short-term rentals to the land use matrix.
Your Honor, I'd move for consideration of ordinance number 5739.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend the land use matrix in section 27-601 of the code to create a new category of use which will be conditional with an existing valid residential conditional use permit, to remove bed and breakfast inns as a conditional use in District BP, to add short-term rentals to the land use matrix, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5739 carries on first reading.
Again, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5739 on second and third.
Motion second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5739 carries on second and third.
Takes us to item 26. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5740, amending section 2-5 of the city code to include registration fees for sexually oriented businesses, a license fee for short-term rentals, and an electric vehicle charging fee.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5740.
Second.
Motion second, and for some background on this, Val, once again, please.
Yes, a couple of these are due to the code that just passed, and then the sexually oriented business code that passed here about a month or so ago. Since this is such quite a lengthy section of code, we try to group them as much as possible when we do these. And so we waited. The sexually oriented business annual renewal fee is $250, which is kind of our standard fee that we have for a lot of licensures like food trucks and such. The manager's fee would be $50, and then the initial registration would be $250, which would also take care of the first year's registration. And then for the short-term rental license annually, we're proposing $150, which is what we've seen at the other city that we were looking at. And then the other one is the electric vehicles. So we do have the electric vehicle charger out here on the south side of the building. And the charging fee for the first 4 hours is $2. And then after the first 4 hours, it's $1 thereafter. And I believe Lyle had put that together, and that it was the same thing that NPPD charges with theirs.
Okay. That would then make charging fees uniform throughout the community where EV chargers are, correct?
I don't know what other private ones charge, if there's something different or if they
The only
wouldn't.
other ones we have now are the MPPD charging stations at First and Norfolk, correct?
I believe so.
That's MPPD's at First and Norfolk.
Yeah. You know, kind of being quasi-governmental, we felt that being in line with them was kind of advantageous to us. On the private business side, it's not uncommon. You'll see private businesses put them in as a way to attract individuals or people to their site. And it, you know, might be low cost or no cost in some cases at some private businesses.
Okay.
You had mentioned the manager's fee, the $50 for a business. What, so they pay that fee for just like a background check or whatever that we have to do on some of those?
Yeah, the manager also has an application that has to fill out, and I believe the police does a background check on them too.
In the ordinance applies, this is more of a zoning ordinance under your department. Does this apply in the extraterritorial area then too?
The sexually oriented business does not,
Okay.
but the short-term rental does.
All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend section 2-5 of the official city code to include registration fees for sexually oriented businesses, a license fee for short-term rentals, and an electric vehicle charging fee, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5740 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, in light of this ordinance tying in with everything else that we've passed on second and third, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5740 on second and third.
Second.
Motion and second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5740 carries on second and third.
Okay, that takes us to our regular agenda. Item number 27, I would look for a motion to consider approval to award a contract to Constructors Incorporated of Lincoln, Nebraska for the Asphaltic Overlay 2021 project for an amount of $1,167,210.57.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion second, and to hear some background on this, Steve Ramus, our Public Works Director.
Mayor and City Council, before you here is a recommendation to award a bid to Constructors Inc. of Lincoln, Nebraska for $1,167,210.57 to complete several asphalt mill and overlay projects throughout the community. I'll briefly just kind of read a few of those. Highway 81, at the intersection of Paswalk Avenue, we have some patching at the directly at the intersection seam. East Norfolk Avenue from 27th Street, right in there is where we have a concrete section that meets asphalt, and we've got quite a bit of shoving going on in the eastbound lane. 7 Norfolk Avenue from 7th Street to 1st Street. That would be a full width mill and overlay, curb to curb, through the downtown section. The area of Norfolk Avenue from Cottonwood east to the east, all the way across the levee structure. Again, full width mill and overlay. North 1st Street from Benjamin Avenue north to the levee structure. That's a rural section of road here in the community. That will be a full depth mill and overlay, and we'll do some base stabilization in that area as well. We have some concrete repair panels in there. There's also quite a bit of shoving going on, fairly substantial rutting. It's all due to inappropriate base conditions there that we just need to stabilize. Thinking of here a couple other ones. We will do some overlay on 18th in front of Bel Air. That section is actually going to be reconstructed as part of our concrete reconstruction projects, but we will get in there and do a little bit of capping just to keep that in place and make that more drivable here this fall for the school session through next year. Same on Michigan Avenue. We'll do a little bit of cap and overlay on Michigan Avenue in there, where we've got some really rough stuff just to get us through until we can get that project in place to reconstruct Michigan Avenue. We'll do a little bit of parking lot work in the downtown area as well. 7th Street, let's see here, 7th Street from Prospect, here just east of us or west of us, down to Madison Avenue as well, so in front of our fire station, in front of down past our Chamber of Commerce area. Those are some of the major sections that we'll be working on. We did have 2 bidders on that project. One of them was Western Engineering. They were at $1.6 million. So you can see here, just with the 2 bidders, we did have quite a bit of difference between the 2, but constructors will do a great job. We expect this work to be completed this year. They'll start somewhere around the first part of August, mid-August. If they can't get the plant here prior to school starting, they've committed to work with us to get asphalt from another location to get that work on 18th done there in front of Bel Air, and some work done on Michigan. I would also note that we did delay awarding this. We had this on the last agenda and then held it as a function of milling off the bridge deck. We're not 100% sure what we see when we get in there. Purpose to milling it is so we can get in there, do a delamination survey, and get either a deck rehab or deck replacement project in place. Once we do have that open, it's very possible there might be something in there that we just need to get finished. We're hoping it's somewhere less than 30 square yards. And so we've been negotiating with them on a square yard price for that work. We do have a number from them. It's about $1,500 a square yard for that replacement. So we're only going to do it if it's really, really bad. Otherwise, we would just resurface that with another 2-inch overlay and then get down the road and plan our deck rehab or deck replacement project. So there will be a change order coming in for that following this. We didn't have time to really get that in place as a function of the contract. So.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions?
Steve, who's doing Madison counties right now? The asphalt work?
That is complete. That was Western Engineering. So that was the 1.6 million bid.
Okay.
So, Steve, this is far and beyond what we would typically do in any given year or have resources to do. But it was a few weeks ago when the council discussed and determined that it was a prudent use of resources to designate a significant portion of our CARES Act funding, actually a majority of those funds, to this street program. So that's primarily, for public record, that's primarily how this is being funded this year, correct?
That's correct. $1 million of this will be CARES Act funding.
Okay. Which I think is consistent with what we consistently hear as a urgent community need, is addressing some of our street infrastructure repair and maintenance needs. So this is a good start. It doesn't by any means cover all the work need to be done, but gives us a good head start on catching up. So I appreciate, again, staff work on this, creating a package that covers a lot of territory and utilizes, I think, a pretty competitive bid to do so. So any other discussion or comments?
Just one comment, Steve. Will this kind of have a schedule that we can put this out to the public so they kind of know where the public has the information of where we're going to start and be at in the projects? And
Yeah, as we get closer to knowing exactly when they're going to be here with their plant, we'll put out a schedule to the public. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of coordination with downtown businesses as we're doing that, as well as other locations around the community. But yeah, we'll be working three to 4 weeks ahead of schedule.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 28, we look for a motion to consider approval to award a contract to Elkhorn Paving Construction Company of Norfolk, Nebraska for the U.S. Highway 275 Trail Undercrossing RTP 2017-001 project for an amount of $344,229.31.
I'll make a motion for consideration.
Motion second, and again, Steve, some background on this, please.
Mayor and Council, this one's been a long time coming, but we got it here. This was waiting for a 408 permit through the Corps of Engineers office. That was issued. We went ahead and bid that. We did get 3 bids in on that: Elkhorn Paving, Robert Whaler and Sons, and Votscapes. The low bid was $344,229.31. High bid was $373,140, or I'm sorry, $446,178. So a reasonable spread for a small project. Elkhorn Paving will do a great job. They've done some projects for us. The project part of the delay on getting the 408 permit was certainly the 2019 flood. Our permit actually went in, I think, in April of 2018 for review and approval. They reached their funding limits for reviewing 408, and so ours sat on the desk for a while. The 2019 flood then made them review that a little bit harder, and so there was some redesign that came back as a function of their review, some additional infrastructure that we needed to put in, or just structure as a function of the trail. And so the project is fully funded within our budget, and I'd answer any questions.
I see the start date is May of 2022. Am I seeing that right on that bid tab?
That is correct.
This price is still gonna be good a year from now?
Yes, the prices are locked in as a function of the bid. Once we award the contract, they're locked in.
Is it worth our time to look at that second bid if they can do it a year sooner?
We'd have to find the additional money to get it done to do that. I'd have to look at that and put some thought into that. We did not base the bid, the advertising or the bid as a function of, when the work can be completed. So that wasn't advertised with that concept in place. So I don't know that I'd have to talk to our council and see if that would be legal for us to go out and do. Typically, if you're going to do that and make that start date or a function of the bid, it's advertised as such.
Steve, I don't recall what we had budgeted for this. It's been, like you said, a long time coming. It's been in the works for probably a couple of years, but
Yeah.
same page, the bid tab page says the opinion of probable cost was $255,000, and we're pretty close to $100,000 over that.
Yeah, that opinion of estimated cost was when we originally put the project together. That does not represent the work that came in post-flood. There was quite a bit of work that came in, substructure, retaining wall associated with that. There's a small wall in there that now that'll have to be constructed. And so, I'd say that cost does not represent that. The money that I was tracking, I had this set, I've had to add about $34,000 to the project from actually 39.4 was what we added as a function of the additional work for the Corps. And so with that leaves me about $8,000 left in contingency for the project. So my number that I was tracking internally was probably 305 to 310, kind of in that general area.
Steve, what portion of this is covered by state recreational trails grant funding?
I think it's 250,000 is covered by the grant.
Okay.
And then we have our match and stuff on top of that.
Okay. Any other questions? Discussion.
So Steve, looked at quite a few of these, or with the council here. We talk about mobilization, and that's getting there, right? Getting all their equipment there and everything that they have to do. Just can't understand how a local company is 3 times higher than a company down the road in Wayne, Nebraska, just to get here.
It's we don't really control what they want to put into MOB. I would say it's not untypical. 5 to 10% is pretty typical for MOB. Mm-hmm. And so on about a $340,000 bid, I'd expect to see somewhere in that $20,000 to $30,000 range for a MOB price.
Okay.
I did notice one more thing when you look at that breakdown, that subgrade preparation, 38,000 versus 5,000. And I know when it comes to Streets, we're pretty particular about our subgrading going in there. Is that, is there any concern there on your end that one is devoting quite a bit of their resources to that?
The $8.12 for excavation would be right within probably our bid target for average unit bid prices, when you look at average unit bid prices. The bids out there at $3 a square yard and $5 a square yard, 5's probably right at the bottom end of what I would consider to be average unit bid price. Factor in that you're working in the levee, it's gonna make it a little bit tougher. I think Vodscapes, I'm not exactly sure what they were doing there with their $3, but I mean, the cost, I don't know that the cost is different, they've just put those dollars somewhere else. Probably Moab.
You say there isn't any difference in the cost on that?
Well, it's, you know, whoever's gonna, when you actually get out there and move the material, and you've got your labor cost, your equipment cost, that cost to do that work is gonna be about the same for every bidder. Some of those might have put some of that cost up front in their mobilization, so that they're just capturing that dollar a little bit earlier in the project as a function of the mob payment. But I'd say $6 to $10 is probably where I would typically see this from an average unit bid price.
Any other discussion?
Wait, oh, I got one more, I guess. 'Cause I'm looking at that same number, and I was talking about how much over we are from the estimate, and the retaining wall being, on Elkhorn's 43,000, and Robert Wohlers and Sons at only 27,000, which throws me way off still, but, so I think we're way over where we need to be, honestly. I don't know how you quote something being a year out for construction, not knowing what concrete's gonna be, especially right now, it's probably the highest it's been by a long shot. But following that, my question really is, if 2022 is the date for Elkhorn, how soon do we have to use this grant money? Is there a time?
As long, we might still need to request an extension on the grant, but talking to John and Jan, as long as we've awarded the project and the dollars are committed, we're fine. I was just gonna do some quick math here for you, Councilman. We have 1,920 square yards. So that he pencils out to about 1,700 linear feet. So the trail portion, just looking at trail and grading, you know, the trail itself, the 6-inch concrete trail, and the grading, 119,000, 76,000 on measured earthwork. You know, you throw in some mob and stuff in there. An old number I used to use was about $100 a foot. It's probably closer to $110 to $120 a foot today. So just the concrete work, the grading, the mobilization for a very straightforward trail project would be running somewhere around $190,000. Then we've got a $43,000 in retaining wall, some bollard signage, handrail, wall foundation.
Any further discussion?
I was carrying about 305 for the project.
Other discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 29 would look for a motion to consider resolution number 2021-18, approving a sidewalk waiver requested by Bruce Strong for property located at 2812 East Benjamin Avenue.
I'll make a motion for consideration of resolution number 2021-18.
Second.
Motion second. Again, for some background on this, Steve Ramus, please.
Val, you want
Or Val,
to?
sorry.
I'll have Val start here.
Okay.
I'll start it. The sidewalk waiver before you is pretty much written exactly the same way as Eric Wilson's that you saw about a month ago, because it is just the next lot that connects to the east of his. And I believe you guys amended the planning commission waiver from 2 years to 3 years, so we included the 3 years in it. And Steve can let you know as to where he is on getting the 3-year mark of getting that trail in.
Yeah, I think in addition there, we know that there's some movement on the next parcel potentially as well.
At least on county GIS, it's been sold to someone else. We don't have a building permit in yet.
Yeah. So as that happens, we'll probably start work on some of the engineering component to that here this fall. We'll get that surveyed towards late summer. We'll do the survey internally, and I would expect we would put the plans together internally for that, and then structure a sidewalk district to put that in place. The funding that would come for our 50% of the share would be part of the dollars that we carry in our capital improvement program for our trails. I think we have 100,000 or so we'll be carrying over the next several years to go into our trail system. So that would be how we would pay for our share of that. And then I think as soon as we see activity on that third parcel is when I would be wanting to pull the trigger and get that in place.
Okay, any questions?
Just a general question about some other properties we haven't granted a waiver. So when do they have to have the sidewalk in? How soon? I mean, what's the, if we said, no, you don't get a waiver, but you gotta put a sidewalk in, how soon does that have to be done?
If the waiver is not granted, then before they can get a CO on their house, a certificate of occupancy, the sidewalk would need to be in.
And that includes things that are out in the ET area.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, resolution 2021-18 is adopted.
Item 30, we'll look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5741, amending city code sections 13-303 and 13-304 to remove the requirement that a sidewalk cafe be attached to a restaurant for the service of alcohol, and to amend section 13-307 to include violation of terms of license agreement as a cause for suspension or revocation of license.
I'll make a motion for consideration of ordinance number 5730 or 41.
Second?
Motion second, and for some background on this, Andy Colvin, our city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Well, just as you can see from the description of this code, originally when we developed the code to allow sidewalk cafes, meaning a cafe that could be out in the right of way on a sidewalk, we limited that to restaurants, essentially. So you had to have 35% of your sales to be from food. Since then, we've gotten interest to have a business downtown that does not meet that requirement. And so to serve alcohol, we needed to either not allow that or change the code. So we did present this to the City Council Subcommittee and went through the options, and this seemed to be the most reasonable option, using the enforcement of this, if there were any issues, to be through the licensing procedure, so we could revoke that license. So really what this does is remove the requirement for sales of food so that any business can apply for a license as long as they have the space to meet ADA and to be able to occupy the right of way, and they have fencing and all those things that they need, similar to what you'd see at a couple of our businesses downtown. So this will make it easier to do so, and we're essentially removing that food sales requirement.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any questions? So Andy, just for an example, and this example doesn't necessarily apply to requests that we currently have, but if a say a wine bar opened up downtown and wanted to have a sidewalk patio like we've seen developed in other places under the existing regulation or the existing ordinance, that wouldn't be allowed because that wine bar is not meeting the 35% threshold for revenue generated by food sales.
That's correct.
So with this change, that would be now allowed.
Any business essentially could have sidewalk seating as long as they meet all the requirements of having that and to serve alcohol.
Okay. Well, having been present in the discussion of this and subcommittee considering different options to open this up, I think it was done in a spirit of being reasonable about permissiveness with prudence, and I think this is a good outcome and a good solution for that, and allows for continued momentum and growth and development of these kinds of people gathering spaces in our downtown area. Any other questions, discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend sections 13-303 and 13-304 of the official city code to remove the requirement that the sidewalk cafe be attached to a restaurant for the service of alcohol, to amend section 13-307 to include violation of terms of license agreement as a cause for suspension or revocation of license, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5741 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, hearing no opposition to this, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass this ordinance on second and third.
Second.
Motion and second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5741 carries on second and third.
Okay, item 31, look for a motion to consider resolution number 2021-19 to add 4 stop signs to control traffic along Sheridan Drive as part of the Blackberry Heights addition, and 1 stop sign to control southbound traffic at North 30th Street and Dover Drive as part of that addition.
I'll make a motion for consideration of resolution 2021-19.
Second.
Motion and second to hear some background on this. Chief Don Miller of the Norfolk Police Division.
Mayor and City Council, this resolution is part of the Blackberry Heights addition. They're designating Sheridan as a through street east and west. To accommodate that, we have to put a couple of stop signs along there, similar to what we've done on Dover. And then the 5th stop sign is actually on Dover and 30th Street to another addition that's already been in place. They've had a temporary sign there, but we need to codify that with a permanent one, just to control traffic on Dover. So part of the addition process. Any questions?
Okay. Questions for Chief?
Just one quick one, Chief. Is that are we having issues up there? Is there somebody who's requesting this? What's the reasoning?
As part of, if you look at the design of that neighborhood, Dover is an east-west street that's been designated as a one-way, or as a through street, so there's stop signs. Sheridan is designated as a through street, so they requested the stop signs as part of the engineering for that build. There isn't hardly any development yet. The roads are in place, but the homes and stuff are not there yet.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2021-19 is adopted.
Okay, item number 32, I'd look for a motion to consider resolution number 2021-20, approving the mayor's reappointment of the clerk, treasurer, engineer, attorney, and administrator as required by state statute.
Your Honor, I'd move for consideration of resolution number 2021-20.
Second?
Motion second. And just to give some explanation on this item, as explained in the item by state statute, mayor of a first-class city is required every 4 years to make appointments or reappointments to key city staff positions, and that's what we're doing here. It's an important decision, a weighty decision. I am proud that we have an administrative team with the depth and breadth of experience that each of these individuals brings. The team has gelled together well and has embraced a culture of problem solving and pragmatism and progress that has helped our community grow. So with that, I am proud of their record of accomplishment in public service, and I'm happy to put forward this series of reappointments for approval to the council. So any discussion, questions? Okay, hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2021-20 is adopted.
Final item, number 33. We look for a motion to consider approval of an employment agreement with Andrew Colvin for the position of Norfolk City Administrator.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion and second, and to go along with item number 32, this is the formal agreement with Andy Colvin to continue on in the position of Norfolk City Administrator for review and approval subject to the council. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, and with that, baseball fans, we are adjourned. Good evening. Go Big Red.